Hey everyone, this is Chris Farrell again, the host of Nerd Alert News. What I did last week when I did the show is I kind of experimented a little bit. I put the show up on YouTube Live to broadcast it, which was kind of an adventure. It was kind of a behind the scenes for folks to see the process I do. You could see the script of what I do, which is roughly an outline, and see how the show is made, see how the sausage is made almost. So I decided to try it again this week. I cleaned up the intro a little bit, well, the intro graphics and stuff a little bit, so it's a prettier site on YouTube now. So we've got that going for us, and we're going to do the exact same thing. I'm going to record the actual Nerd Alert News show live on YouTube. You'll see me do some updates and stuff in Audacity while I'm doing that because I'll have the Audacity windows up. Everything like that. It's an experiment. I'll keep doing it for a little while just to see if people are liking it. And I did announce ahead of time that this is being recorded live and can be watched over at live.nerdalertnews.com. If you do drop in and watch the show live, please head on over there. Pass me some words of encouragement or whatnot in the chat room, because if I start to suck today, I would not mind some words of encouragement. But I guess it's time that I actually start recording the actual podcast now instead of talking to all you folks here in YouTube land. So let's move on to the recording side of things. And I do have a fancy new screen for that. We'll see if it switched just right. And it actually switched the way it was supposed to. So I sort of know what I am doing now. So that is a plus. Sort of know. If you're watching live, you'll see you've got me in video in the top right-hand corner of the screen. The bottom right-hand corner of the screen is a preview of what I will be recording in Audacity, because I'll do some live edits on the fly. And on the left side is my outline that I put together for each show. The show notes can be found over at shownotes.nerdalertnews.com. It's some outlines and then links back to all the sites where I find these news stories. All that being said, I guess it's time to actually record the podcast now, because that's what you all are here for. So, sorry I got distracted a second. I had to make sure I had the right microphone set up for this. So, since I've got all that set up, let's get started recording episode 43 of Nerd Alert News. Hello everyone, I'm Chris Farrell, and welcome to episode 43 of Nerd Alert News. It's hard to keep on top of all the nerdy news that floods the internet, but that's where this show comes in. I'm going to do all the hard work and find all that news that you need to know. And just a quick heads up to anyone who's listening to the audio podcast at a later date, I'm continuing my experiment of recording this live over on YouTube, where you can watch me do the show live if you want in the future. The times are random right now. I'll try and put a schedule out later, but feel free, head on over to the YouTube, the GonnaGeek channel if you want, and see how the show is recorded live. It's nothing crazy or in-depth, but it is kind of fun to get a behind-the-scenes view of the quasi-production work I do while doing this live. I don't know, I don't really feel like I can say the term producer as much. Basically, I just kind of clean up my stuttering and stammering while I'm recording, and then clean up the file after the live show is done. But that's enough of me rambling about how the show is made itself. Why don't we just roll into the headlines? And if you're watching live, I paused right there because that's an edit point for me in the post-show. I'm going to dump in at the 103 mark on Audacity, the bump that I need for the News of the Week segment. I don't like to use the soundboard and plug those in for the live presentation right now because it's just cleaner, I think, to edit it in post-production. That's just me, though. Maybe I'm being weird, but I'm going to get back onto the show here in just a sec. Let me grab a drink of water real quick, and we'll be back to recording the audio podcast out of this live video. It's kind of trippy saying it that way. So the first story comes courtesy of PCGamer.com. There'd been a rumor going around for a while that there might be a remastered, a remade version of BioShock coming soon. Well, that has been confirmed at long last. BioShock the Collection is coming soon. The collection will contain BioShock 1, 2, plus the Protector Trials and Minerva's Den DLC. And you'll also get BioShock Infinite with all the DLC. That's Clash in the Clouds, Columbia's Finest, and Burial at Sea, episodes 1 and 2. Side note, if you have not played BioShock Infinite, you really should play it. It is an awesome game, and the Burial at Sea DLC is fantastic. It takes you back from Columbia to Rapture, and you bounce back and forth between Columbia and Rapture in that DLC. It's really cool. It's really cool. PC Gamer did find out This BioShock collection comes out September 13th in the United States, September 16th globally, at the cost of $59.99. So why is this a big deal? Well, they've been remastered. Everything except BioShock Infinite, that is, has been remastered. According to 2K, they said that's because it already meets current next-gen console standards and runs smoothly on high visual settings. So I play these games on Steam, and I will say BioShock Infinite looks really pretty on my PC still to this day. I've had no issues with that. I've cranked it up. I've been running at 1080p, 60 frames a second. My computer's about a year and a half old, and it doesn't have the highest end graphics card in the world because it's a podcasting rig, but it does not stutter through BioShock Infinite. It looks gorgeous on there. But here is the other bit of good news that BioShock gamers are going to love, especially if you have these games on PC. If you're a PC gamer who already owns BioShock 1, 2, or the Minerva's Den DLC, you will get to upgrade those games to the respective remastered editions free of charge. Yes, that means if you've bought these games on Steam sometime in the last 3-4 years, you get them for free, the remastered versions, when this releases on September 13th. And I would also mention to you right now, if you don't own them and you're kind of curious about them, Steam Summer Sale is going on right now, and I've seen the BioShock collection often on sale, a good deal. I think yesterday I saw the BioShock collection for as low as, I want to say, 12 or 13 bucks. That's all 3 games. It's well worth it. You pick it up now, wait until September, then get your remastered editions for free and play it through with the better graphics if you really wanted to wait and get the best user experience potentially. So there is some other new content you'll get with this. There's a director's commentary video series with input from Ken Levine, a virtual museum of concepts cut from the original BioShock, and a number of what they call challenge rooms to test yourself outside of BioShock's story. I don't know a ton about what the challenge rooms are, but I do know that the commentary video series from Ken Levine could be very interesting. The world of BioShock is just incredibly entrancing and enthralling. There's so much stuff that goes on in there. There's so much of a backstory that's been built up. I'll probably take some time and watch through a lot of those director's commentaries when this comes out, but that's just me. You guys might not be as big a BioShock nerds as I am, and there's nothing wrong with that. At the very least, it's well worth considering buying these games now on PC so that you get the remastered editions for free. If you bought them on your Xbox 360s, I'm sorry, the only way you're going to be able to play, or your PlayStation 3s, lest I be accused of any favoritism, the only way you'll get to play the remastered editions is to buy them again when they're released on September 13th. This game comes out for all the major consoles right now and PC. If your PC can do it, get it on PC because it's a lot cheaper right now. That's all I'm telling you guys. That's all I'm telling you. Oh crap. It helps when I am doing things to make sure that I actually have the cursor on Audacity when I want to pause the recording versus having it in my Google Doc and randomly hitting the space bar inside some text. Yeah, I totally just did that. So, let's move on to the second headline story. The second headline story I've got for you guys tonight comes courtesy of comicbookresources.com, where they've got the news that Netflix has ordered a Lost in Space series. That's right, they're doing a remake of the classy... edit point. They're doing a remake of the classy... I'm going to cut that out. They're doing a remake of the classic 1960s science fiction TV show Lost in Space. It is a 10-episode series order that Netflix has picked up. Netflix Vice President Cindy Holland did an interview with Variety where she told them the following. The original series was so deftly captured... Wow, I screwed all that up. The original... Let's do an edit point there. The original series so deftly captured both drama and comedy, and that made it very appealing to a broad audience. The current creative team's reimagining of the series for Netflix is sure to appeal to both fans who fondly remember the original and to create a new generation of enthusiasts around the world. Hopefully nobody goes into this new series thinking about the movie from the early 2000s, late 90s. It did not hold up nearly as well. It was not as good as the 60s series, but maybe that's just nostalgia that makes me say that. I could be wrong. So a little bit of details about who's running this remake or this new series. The remake is also being written... Wow, screwed that up. Or this new series. Edit point. If you're watching the video right now, I'm just editing out a couple little audio hiccups before I go back. This remake. It's being written by Dracula Untold screenwriters Matt Sazama and Burke Sharpless, and it's being described as, quote, an epic but grounded science fiction saga focusing on a young explorer family from Earth lost in an alien universe and the challenges they face in staying together against seemingly insurmountable odds, end quote. Sounds like Lost in Space. Sounds like another cool sci-fi series, and if anything, Netflix has proved they're willing to put money down towards new series, and how can I say this best? They're not as concerned about it having killer download numbers. I was going to say ratings, killer download numbers, as it is more draw people into Netflix to make them want to watch more content on Netflix. So I have a good feeling about this. It could be pretty good, but maybe it's just because I really enjoyed the original version. And we could be way ahead of ourselves right now, though, because there has been no release date yet announced for the Lost in Space remake. So keep your eyes and ears open, kids, and we'll let you know when we hear anything new about this series. Sorry, video guys, need another drink. I found when I do this podcast, I end up having to drink a lot more water for some reason. I'm not sure why. So for this next story, we're going to bounce back to E3 for a little while. We did a 3-part series on Nerd Alert News. It's 3 days in a row of E3 coverage. And if you listen to the Nintendo episode, you probably noticed there was no news about Nintendo's new console that came out at E3. Well, Polygon has a story that explains why that might have been the case, just why Nintendo might have kept the NX out of E3. And before I get into the story, I did want to give a big thanks to listener Neil for passing this along to me. This is pretty much because of him that I got this story. He actually directly tweeted it to me, and then I read it and went, oh, that was a good pull, Neil. I would have found this one, but you definitely made sure it got on my radar a lot sooner. So I do appreciate that, Neil, and I appreciate all listeners who send me news stories they want to hear about. So let's get into the NX and why it was kept out of E3. Nintendo did not showcase its upcoming new hardware known as the NX at this year's E3 due to concerns about imitators. This is according to comments made at the company's recent shareholders meeting and then translated into English from Japanese on Twitter. So there's a couple leaps down the rumor mill pipe, so it might not all necessarily be right, but it sounds like it could be true. So Shigeru Miyamoto was asked about it during this meeting. He said, normally we would have shown the NX D3, but we didn't. We're worried about imitators if we release info too early. So, not exactly a bad idea. Remember, when the Wii was first announced and the motion controls, that kind of set in motion both Microsoft and Sony exploring their own methods of motion control. It was not done with like the Wiimote nunchuck or anything like that. They used, in Kinect's case, or Microsoft's case rather, a Kinect camera where it would do full body tracking. PlayStation put out the PlayStation Eye. It was not quite the same, but they all kind of jumped on board with the ideas that Nintendo was having. So Nintendo kept pretty tight-lipped on what the NX is going to be capable of. There's been some rumors that have come out, but there's very little that's actually been confirmed. There are reports that would use, quote, industry-leading chips, end quote. That's one we've seen for a while. There's also suggestions it's going to share elements with the company's handheld consoles, and its controller will be a complete departure from those of past consoles. One of the other rumors that I've heard is that you could theoretically pick up the controller and go and play your full NX game library wherever you go. I don't know if that's true. The internet's full of rumors on just what might be coming into the NX. We don't know anything for sure, but it doesn't seem that VR is going to be included in that. We've seen a big push for VR with Sony and Microsoft, both in their current generation of consoles. So Nintendo of America VP Reggie Fils-Aime said, well, long play sessions are an issue in regards to VR. Screwed that up. So Nintendo of America VP Reggie Fils-Aime said, sorry, cleaning this up. In regards to VR, that long play sessions are an issue. We want to release something that can be played for long periods, carries value, and is affordable. We want parents to feel at ease. So, does not seem like Nintendo's going to be jumping on the VR bandwagon, but if you believe all the rumors, NX is going to be completely different than anything we've seen before. hopefully we're hearing something about it soon, because I want to say March is when that's slated to drop, March 2017. So that puts us roughly 9 months out and we know nothing. Maybe holiday season, everything's going to start coming out. I don't know. I'm very curious about what's coming in the NX, and the absence of details, I think, worries me more than anything right now. And maybe that's just because I'm an alarmist when it comes to Nintendo. It's just the last two generations of console have not really done it for me, and I'm really hoping to see things come back to a console that is of more interest to me. And that wraps up headline number 3. Another water break real quick. So the show has been pretty video game heavy this week, and that's kind of going to continue now, because this next story is also video game centric, but it had to be talked about. It comes courtesy of IGN, where they have reported that Batman Return to Arkham has been indefinitely delayed. Warner Brothers confirmed that Batman Return to Arkham will not be ready for its slated July 29th release date. Keep in mind it's July 2nd when I record this, so we were only less than a month away of this coming out. Just why was the game delayed? Well, a representative of Warner Brothers Games, Steve Grayson, had some info in that. Grayson, that's a nice name to have if you're involved in a Batman project. He said, after reviewing the progress of the project, the team at WB Games has decided to delay the release of Batman Return to Arkham to give the team at Virtuous Games additional time to deliver a polished Batman Arkham game experience. We do not have a release date yet, and we will be sure to communicate that once we are sure the game will be ready. We know this is disappointing news, but we feel the extra time will allow the team to create the best gaming experience for our fans. So it probably shouldn't surprise us, considering we just recently found out about this. It seemed overly ambitious to get a remake of the first 3 Arkham games out, and that, I guess it was only the first 2 Arkham games, out that quickly. It's still coming, and they're delaying it for the right reasons. Warner Brothers just kind of learned their lessons, because if you look, they got burned by their last 2 Batman games. Batman Arkham Origins was and still is terribly glitchy, especially if you're a PC gamer. And they didn't actually fix a lot of the glitches because they are more focused on the DLC. And if you remember the Batman Arkham Knight release, it came out on PC, then actually got pulled down off of Steam for a while because the game was so unstable for some PC gamers that Rocksteady had to go back to their PC development team, because I believe they contracted it out, and work with them to get the game done right. So this is a smart move from Warner Brothers Games here. It is, we want to make sure we get this right, because we can't avoid another hit of putting out a game that's not ready, and the fan angst and anger that comes out of that, because that's a no-win for everyone. So what all is included in this Batman Return to Arkham game, though? We haven't heard a lot, or I hadn't heard a lot until just recently, so if you hadn't heard, the box set is set to feature improved graphics as well as upgraded models, environments, lighting, effects, and shaders. It's going to be made up of Batman Arkham Asylum and Batman Arkham City, with all their associated DLC content and the Game of the Year edition bonuses. So they are games from last generation, but they are prettied up to look better on this current generation of consoles. I'm very tempted by this, I'll be honest. I love the Batman Arkham games. I have played through Arkham Asylum and Arkham City multiple times. I'm about 1.5 times through Arkham Knight. I kind of want to get these just so I can play them on my Xbox One, I'll be honest. My guess is probably going to be about $50 or $60 when it comes out, so I'll be one of those that probably waits about 6 to 8 months, wait for that first price drop, and I'll be picking up Batman Return to Arkham for my Xbox One, I wager. So that wraps up the headlines for this week. Before we move into the featured story of the week on Nerd Alert News, this is a good time in the show where I like to remind folks that Nerd Alert News is part of the GonnaGeek Network. You can find the network over at GonnaGeek.com. There's 17, 18 different podcasts on the network of all varieties of different geeky content, be it about TV shows, lifestyles, video gaming, you name it, we've probably got something there. And I always like to try and highlight one episode of a show from the network when I record Nerd Alert News. This week I want to talk about the official GonnaGeek.com podcast. This is episode 151, Podcast Awards 2016. Sorry, live video guys, I could not get away from the mic fast enough to cough. This week, GFQ Network Suncast joins us for episode 151 of this award-winning podcast to discuss Hulu abandoning CW shows, James Earl Jones returning as Darth Vader in Star Wars Rogue One, and the possibility of a Chromebook Pro. Finally, we discussed this year's People's Choice Podcast Awards 2016 and discussed some of the brouhaha which came out of it. We'll discuss the facts and also give our individual opinions on the controversy. And that's episode 151 of the GonnaGeek.com podcast. Find that over at GonnaGeekNetwork.com. And if you're a host of a geeky podcast and you're trying to find a network, don't forget the GonnaGeek Network is always looking for new podcasts to join our ranks. Go to GonnaGeek.com/join. You're welcome to submit your podcast to join our network. There should be an announcement coming out in the next day or two of our most recent addition to the GonnaGeek Network. So we are growing. We are, in fact, growing. All right, guys. So that wraps up. Oh, that's a really good topic, though. And So that wraps up the promotional period of things. And I did have an in-depth story, but I kind of want to do something else here. And I'm going to change this up on the fly. Let me start recording. So this is normally the part of the show where I'd go into my in-depth story of the week. I generally pull something out of the show notes, then I say, this is the big story I want to talk the most about, or make sure I can set aside to be of interest. And I had one set up that I was really interested in doing, and then I talked about the Gonna Geek podcast from this last week and the podcast awards. And part of me kind of wants to talk about that a little bit and not rehash everything that was said on Gonna Geek 151, but kind of give a little bit of my take on what I saw happen and then refer you guys back to 151. So I'm gonna mix up the script right now, actually, and I'm gonna drop this in-depth story. I'm gonna move it off to next week, and I'm gonna discuss the podcast awards, I think. So yeah, I'm gonna mix it up. This is something very different for me. I normally don't just change up the script, but something there kind of spoke to me. So let's talk about the People's Choice Podcast Awards 2016. So a little bit of background. In the past, last year rather, I think it had been associated with the New Media Expo. This year it was kind of spun off on its own. Todd Cochran's the man that was in charge of the Podcast Awards this year. You might know him as the CEO of Blueberry, one of the podcasting sites out there. He put a lot of hard work into the Podcast Awards, be it the whole nomination process, getting the website refactored and ready. He did a ton of work, and kudos to Todd for doing that. So a little bit of background for you if you're a podcaster out there and you're not quite sure how all the awards worked. I want to say it was probably 2 or 3 months ago, nominations started for the Podcast Awards, and that was your chance to go to podcastawards.com, submit the podcasts that you thought were worthy of being recognized with a podcast award. So that's great as a listener. That was your way to get that podcast out there, say, hey, I really enjoy podcast X. I think it deserves a podcast award. I would love to see it get recognized by its peers. So as a podcaster, though, in order to actually have our nomination go through and potentially be voted on to get an award, there was a mandate of, well, mandate's a strong word. There was a requirement, I guess, that in order to be actually nominated, you as a show had to pay $10 to the Podcast Awards. I understand the reasoning in doing that. It kind of makes sure that only the people interested get to do it. But at the same time, I was kind of going, maybe I'm cheap. I'm a hobby podcaster. I do this for fun. Most of the podcasts I do for fun. I lose money podcasting. And you know what? This is not me going online and complaining about the fact that I lose money podcasting. I'm totally okay with that. It's an expense for my hobby that I pay. Totally cool with that. And paying $10, not the end of the world. But as I thought about it, I went, I do a few small shows right now. In comparison to shows I've seen that have won the podcast awards before. Please don't take that as me disparaging any of my audience, anyone who watches any of my shows. But I kind of knew. I was like, there's no way that even if all of my fans nominated me and voted for me, that I'm going to win one of these things. So I said, I think I'm better off just taking the $10 that I would spend on doing a podcast award and putting it back into the podcast, using it to get extra web space or buy some new toys to use for podcasting, because you do know I have a microphone obsession, always upgrading gear and things like that. So I did not pay the $10 for nomination for the podcast awards. I don't believe any show on the GonnaGeek Network did. Now, I am not going to speak for the GonnaGeek Network on that, but as far as I know, nothing was nominated. Nothing was nominated for the GonnaGeek Network, and none of us paid our $10. That was one of the things that kind of I wish they had told us, I guess is the best way. Is I know I didn't pay my $10. I'm sure there's other folks. I would have loved to have known that I had been nominated, because had I heard I'd been nominated, I might have put the money in then and be like, you know what? I kind of have to do this because my listeners respected me enough to submit my podcast for an award. But that's neither here nor there. The awards were this last Sunday, so let's move forward. Awards were this last Sunday. The nominations have been set. They had a few podcasts set up for each category. There are multiple categories. I want to say 17 of them. And here's how voting worked on the podcast awards. Voting was open for a period of time. During that period of time, you could go daily and you could vote for your favorite podcasts in each of the different categories. You could vote for one podcast in each category, and you could vote one time per day, but you could vote daily over the period of the podcast awards. So you would mark all the podcasts that you wanted to vote for. You would hit the submit button after you've entered your email address at the bottom of the screen. Podcastawards.com emails you an email with a confirmation key that you would click on and then confirm, so that they're making sure there's no bots or spam, or I guess pretty much to make sure you're not automating the process to sit there and be like, oh, I'm going to get a bot network to sit here and vote for Nerd Alert News 70 million times a day or some ridiculous number like that. Makes sense. It's a great idea. So keep that in mind as we start discussing the award winners and things like that. Come Sunday, podcast awards were streamed live online. You could watch and see who won what awards. And there were a lot of shows from a group called the Diamond Club that won. And now let me caveat this. I listen to shows that are part of Diamond Club. Things like Night Attack, things like Cord Killers, things like that. I enjoy a lot of that. I listen to mostly the audio podcasts of them. Sometimes I get a chance to watch the live video streams, but I'm an audio consumer of Diamond Club content. So I already knew, based off of last year's awards, they'd won a good deal, and they're hoping to win many more this year. Part of what the Diamond Club had done is they put together a little bookmarklet. T2T2 is one of the folks over in Chat Realm over at Diamond Club. He put together this little bookmarklet off of his site that you could pull into your bookmarks. You go to podcastawards.com, and it would highlight all the Diamond Club shows or Diamond Club chosen shows for each category. All it would do was highlight those shows on the Podcast Awards website. It didn't check any of the boxes for you. It did not submit any of the forms for you. You would literally see, oh, this line in yellow, that's one of the shows Diamond Club is backing or is part of Diamond Club. It was a good way to kind of get everyone on the same page. They already had everything spelled out on their Reddit, and they'd talked about it before, what all the shows were they were interested in. This is a way for me, as a person, if I had chosen to make it real easy for myself to know what shows I needed to vote for. So this is what the tool is they had rallied behind to help everyone do their voting. And it seemed to have worked for them, because at the end of the Podcast Awards, I think they had won 14 out of the 17 shows that Diamond Club or Diamond Club backed podcasts had been backed for. So it was an awesome turnout, because it's a very motivated fan base winning a popularity contest for podcasters. As the show was wrapping up, however, it kind of was an announcement on podcastawards.com. I don't remember if it was on the live stream or not, that, hold on, things might not have been right. They were investigating cheating allegations because of a potential tool used to perform voting. And they referenced the site, I believe it was hat.t2t2.eu. I cannot recall the exact website. I could pull it up on there, but that's not really the important thing on that one. It's the fact that they found that site, not that it was hidden or anything like that. So there was a lot of concern, and there was some brouhaha, I guess is the best way to put it, to steal a word from Steven, on the internet about whether this was a just way to win your podcast awards. And from my personal standpoint, I don't really see much issue in using this tool to win a podcast award. It is not done by the producers of any of those podcasts. It's not like anyone who does the podcast there put together this tool and said, here, use this to vote for us. What's really cool about this tool put together by the Diamond Club and used by the Diamond Club, it was fans of these shows that put it together this year and put it together last year to make it easier for people to vote for the shows they loved. It's an expression of how much these people care about the shows they watch and listen to that they put this together. And that, I think, is an awesome thing. To have a fan base that is that motivated. They put together a tool like that to make it simple for people to go out and support the shows and the projects they love. In my mind, that is awesome. And I am happy to say that eventually it was revealed from the Podcast Awards site that the awards were going to stand for this year. There was no cheating involved. There was a quasi apology issued on the Podcast Awards website, and I don't remember the exact wording of it, but it was more, if anyone felt slighted or offended, I guess this is your apology, or something to that effect, which it is what it is. It's an apology, because I know there were a lot of people and fans of the Diamond Club that kind of saw the word cheating and went, wait, what? Because I was one of them, actually. I saw the allegation of cheating, and I went, how's that cheating? It's not doing anything besides highlighting for them. And if you want to see for yourself how that highlighting worked, go to geeks.link/Diamond Club. Steven put a link together for the GonnaGeek.com podcast that redirects to about a 1.5 minute long video of how this worked. So I guess I really just wanted to talk about it because in the world of podcasting, this was a very big deal for the last week. And we did talk about it on the GonnaGeek.com podcast, but I wanted to bring it up here because as a podcaster, it was very interesting to me. And I'm glad that a group of podcasters who have very passionate fans were not, in fact, punished for their fans being passionate. Because, like I said, I did not see any issue with the tool that was used here, and I'm glad that the Podcast Awards folks did not, once they took the time to review the tool. Now, my only real concern at this point, though, is there's kind of some talk about we're not sure if the Podcast Awards are going to continue after this, because we're not sure if this really followed the spirit of the awards, is one of the comments I'd seen out there. And I would kind of argue that it did. I mean, this is a popularity contest. People are choosing the people's choice here of podcasts. This is what people loved. And what they did with this bookmarklet was an ultimate expression of love for these shows. Make it easy to vote. I think it's an awesome point. I have absolutely no problem with it. And I hope that as things settle down and people look at it, they come to kind of the same realization that I did. And I really hope to see the People's Choice Podcast Awards continue into the future. I think that there might be some lessons learned that come from this of how you could kind of refine the process better. And I would love to see it a little more open to podcasters that are more of the hobbyist variety, because let's be honest, I knew there was no way in hell that my little show was going to beat anything that was Diamond Club backed, because they have a lot more fans than I do. And now my fans might be just as passionate as theirs, but the numbers come into play there. And this is not me complaining about that at all. This is more of me making a realization that I can't compete with that. So congratulations to all the Podcast Award winners and nominees. I look forward to seeing what happens in the future. If anyone is listening from Podcast Awards or anything like that, a suggestion I would have just off the top of my head for how the process could be improved going forward is maybe you split it into a couple different tiers. You have your, I don't want to say professional, but your more advanced, less hobbyist podcasts on one tier and your hobby podcasters on a separate tier. Because let's be honest, any of us that are a little hobby podcaster that are kind of self-producing and doing everything kind of on our own and being at the money loss stage, we're slightly different than those folks that have the large audience that are Patreon backed and things like that. That's not to say they're better than us or we're worse than them or anything like that. It's just we're at different levels and it's very hard to compete with that level. So I would love to see for Podcast Awards 2017 something along the lines of separate tiers or something like that. But I'm sorry that was long and rambly. I kind of just wanted to discuss a little bit more after GonnaGeek 151. And it didn't really hit me until I read the promo for GonnaGeek 151 and went, I'd really like to discuss this a little bit more. So thank you everyone that hung in there live with me on the YouTube side of things and are listening to me ramble a little bit on the audio podcast version of this. What I had for my featured story this week, I think I'm going to shift that to next week. To the next episode of Nerd Alert News. I will try and maybe do a mini episode between now and next week so I can touch on that one, because I do have some other news stories. It's just the Podcast Awards stuff was a little more timely. We're still within a week of that happening, and things have calmed down on the internet after some of the initial upsetness. So I just wanted to discuss it with a calm, rational thought process on it. This is not me being angry, decrying anyone. I think everyone honestly wanted the awards to be the best they could, and I think as time settles on, everyone will be a little more comfortable with things, and once tempers simmer down a little bit, we can start looking forward to what's going to happen in 2017 for the Podcast Awards. But that is going to wrap up the show for this week. Oh, sorry, guys. I paused the track on the audio side real quick. If you want any more details on any of the stories I've covered this week on the show notes are available online. Head on over to shownotes.nerdalertnews.com to get all the details, or just go to the homepage and click on the show notes button. When you get there, you'll find a page that has all of the Google Docs embedded within it, so you can go and read the show notes for yourself and go get more details on any of these stories I've talked about, aside from the Podcast Awards stuff, because that was kind of just off the top of my head. So if you want some additional thought on that, I would highly suggest head on over to GonnaGeekNetwork.com and check out episode 151 of the official GonnaGeek.com podcast. Alternatively, you can go to geeks.link/151, and that should take you directly to episode 151 of the GonnaGeek.com podcast, where the four of us weigh in with some of our thoughts on the brouhaha that erupted around Podcast Awards 2016. Sorry, video guys. Had to cough there real quick. And I'm at the end of the show notes. If you want to get in touch with the show, there's a variety of ways to do so. You can head on over to the webpage itself and find my contact info there. You can email me directly, nerdalertnews247@gmail.com or chris@gonnageek.com. You can tweet to @nerdalertshow or @thechrisfarrell, or you can head on over to facebook.com/nerdalertshow. I'd love it if you guys would follow any of those social media platforms and send me any stories that you're interested in, because your feedback is hugely important for me shaping the show as we go forward. So I love getting that interaction with folks, and I also love getting iTunes reviews. So if you have a chance, head on over to iTunes, leave me a 5-star review for Nerd Alert News. I would love to get it. But that is going to wrap up this latest installment of Nerd Alert News. But don't worry, I'll be back real soon with your next Nerd Alert. See you later, guys. Bye. All right, so YouTubers, that is going to wrap up the live recording for Nerd Alert News this week. Thank you for any YouTuber who might have hung in there with me or has watched part of this. I really did enjoy doing it, and I kind of did go off on a random tangent there for about 8 to 10 minutes maybe, and thank you for following along with me. I really do greatly appreciate it. So I think that's going to wrap up the live stream here on YouTube. I'll try and do this more often in the future. It seems like it's had some relative success on YouTube, and people have been fairly interested in it. So that's going to wrap up the live recording of Nerd Alert News, episode 43. Stand by for 44 coming sometime later this upcoming week. Bye, guys.